Another chance to fill the political vacuum in Nepal and revive the country's failing economy. Voters head to the polls to choose a new assembly, but will politicians finally be able to agree on a new constitution? Or will the Himalayan nation continue to suffer from the current political deadlock? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. Millions of Nepalese head to the polls on Tuesday to vote in general elections, and a lot is at stake. Nepal has been in a political deadlock since 2008 because politicians have failed to agree on a new constitution. And as Sahel Rahman reports from Kathmandu, that's just one of the many issues that have created uncertainty in the country.
Campaigners are out in force. Every political party trying to get its message across. But it's complex. There are 6,000 candidates, 240 constituencies and 100 different political parties. The current legislature has had 4 years to draft a constitution as part of a peace deal reached with former Maoist rebels, but still nothing has been agreed. The country's unpopular monarchy was replaced in 2008 by a multi-party system. But there have been no municipal elections since 2001, and Nepal remains in a political vacuum.
Someone to establish a number of states. That is divisive. I don't want that.
Politicians make promises. Those that do what we want and need will get my vote.
And that's the central problem. How to satisfy an increasingly bitter and cynical electorate.
There needs to be a constitution. I think the transition needs a better framework, and Nepalese aspirations need to be reflected in the constitution. That's what's really at stake here, what the future of the Nepali state looks like.
But even the man charged with overseeing this ballot, Interim Prime Minister and Chief Justice Khilraj Regmi, has refused to say whether he'll step down after the elections. This has led to some parties threatening to take to the streets if he doesn't go. In the weeks leading up to Tuesday's poll, several people have been hurt in election-related violence. Thousands of soldiers who'd been confined to barracks have now been called back to not only secure the capital Kathmandu, but also the rest of the country. Representatives from the EU, Thailand and the US are just some of the international observers that are here for the elections. But there is a real concern that if no progress is made now, Nepal may experience another long period of instability, which may well turn violent. So the solution could be found here at the Constituent Assembly. And to get there, these elections are their only option. Sahel Rahman, Al Jazeera, Kathmandu, Nepal.
Well, joining me now to try to find some answers to Nepal's many problems are from Kathmandu, Ameet Dhakal, editor of Setopati, an online newspaper based in Nepal. From New Delhi, Prashant Jha, a former Nepal correspondent with the Indian daily newspaper, The Hindu. And from Hertfordshire on Skype, Michael Hutt, Professor of Nepali and Himalayan Studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies. Welcome, gentlemen. Here we go again, Ameet Dhakal, Nepal's second stab at this vote. What do you think this means for the Nepalese?
I think it means a lot. There are big issues on the ballot. The first ever Constituent Assembly, which was constituted, could not deliver the constitution, and this country is in a kind of political transition, a political limbo, if you will. So the election that is happening tomorrow is crucially important in our effort to put the transition to an end.
And are people excited about it? Are they going to turn out in large numbers, do you think?
I think people are excited. There are some concerns about the security, but I expect a huge turnout, as it often happens in Nepali elections.
Prashant, watching from across the border in India, What are your views on these elections?
Well, as Ameet just said, Nepal has been going through this major political transition. In the big picture, Jane, is that the country has moved from war to peace, from a monarchy to a republic, from a Hindu state to a secular state, and from a unitary state to a potentially federal state, all in the span of the last 6 years. Now, these achievements are on the table, but they have not been able to institutionalize it. So the second CA election provides an opportunity to the Nepali political class to learn from some of the mistakes of their last 6 years and institutionalize these achievements. And as one of the commentators in your bulletin, in your report said, this is about the future of the Nepali state. Having said that, this is also about issues of governance. It is about development, and there has been no peace dividend in the last few years, and there is this yearning for a degree of governance which would improve livelihoods. Nepalis leave the country in large numbers to work across the world, including in West Asia and in Southeast Asia. They want jobs at home. So delivering on the big issues, the constitution, also improving governance to improve livelihoods. I think those are the two fundamental issues that this election is about.
And the Nepalese who live where you are they allowed to vote there, or are they going to head home? Is there any enthusiasm to return to do that?
Well, some people, there is a very large pool of migrant workers, Nepali migrant workers in India. The figures range from 3 to 5 million. But there is no system of postal ballots. So some people will go back home. For many people, it's not worth it to go back home. So many won't go back home, which is why the number of voters this time has dipped from 2008. Usually you see a trend of the number of voters increasing, but this time the number of voters on the rolls have decreased because so many people are outside the country.
And Michael, that could be a problem, couldn't it? I mean, if there are not large numbers, then the parties who don't come out too well in this might say, well, look, this is not representative.
Well, there is that issue. There's also the issue of the fact that there's a breakaway faction of the Maoist party, which has been very actively engaged in trying to stop these elections going ahead or disrupting them. And also a total of 33 parties that are boycotting the election. So one hopes for a massive turnout, so that the people that will then subsequently claim that the whole thing hasn't been legitimate will have not too strong a case to make. I think also, I mean, your commentator talked about a political vacuum over recent years, and I think I would sort of disagree with the idea of a vacuum. It's been very, very much the opposite. It's been a very full kind of situation, but with very little clarity about who's going to be in charge, and as Prashant says, how the achievements of recent years are going to be institutionalized.
I want to bring up what you spoke about a little earlier, the Maoist faction, the CPNM, and their attempts to disrupt the election. It doesn't seem to have been successful. Do you think this is the end for the hardline communists, possibly?
It's very hard to say, and obviously from a distance of 6,000 miles, I wouldn't like to say too much about the level of disruption and so on, because I'm not there personally to witness this, and sometimes it's not easy to get a sense of how free and fair an election process is from a distance, or even in the country on the day.
Okay, should we bring in Ameet then on that? Yes. What are your comments as far as that is concerned, Ameet?
The transportation strike CPN Maoist called for the last 10 days, that has remained effective. Most of the highways are closed, though there is some vehicular movements in the big cities. However, there is not much support for the CPN Maoist. Recently, I traveled to about 8 districts in the southern plains and talked to over 200 voters. None of them really supported the idea of boycotting the polls. And nationwide as well, I don't see a lot of support. I don't see any support in favor of the CPN Maoist. Whether it is an end
so we're not looking at a return to war on any level, are we, as far as they are concerned?
I don't think so. So far, they haven't said that they are going back to war. They haven't said that they will pick up arms. But the question is what they will do in the days to come. If they are not taking part in the elections, if they are not going back to any kind of armed insurgency, what is the field they are trying to charter out? we really don't know. But there is a lot of, there is a kind of war fatigue in the Nepali people, so I don't see any chance for them to go back to war or pick up arms.
Michael, from your point of view, how important are these elections and why do you think the last elections failed?
These elections are extremely important. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as the kind of tabloid last chance headline, but we're getting to that point, and we're also at a very attenuated point in terms of the kind of the structure that oversees the elections, with a chief justice heading the government. If this doesn't succeed, it's hard to think of what the next resort may be. I was there in Nepal during the 2008 Constituent Assembly elections, and I remember a huge sense of excitement and optimism, and people saying they were voting for peace and security. Unfortunately, that atmosphere dissipated in the years that followed, with the Constituent Assembly, which was intended primarily as a very large and very representative body that would draft this new constitution to institutionalise the achievements of the People's Movement of 2006, becoming more and more a forum for the leaders of political parties to compete and struggle for power, leaving a lot of the key issues, such as the way in which Nepal could be restructured into a federal state, unaddressed or not properly addressed until a very late stage. So what one wishes to see is a Constituent Assembly elected that will get cracking with addressing these remaining key issues, and then move forward with more certainty, more stability about what the political setup is in Nepal and what the basis is for achieving the things that Prashant was talking about improving the lot of the ordinary man and woman in Nepal.
Prashant, is it a concern that we really are looking at the same leaders and the same issues?
Well, you're definitely looking at the same leaders, because the cast of characters has not drastically changed. But we'll have to wait for the results of the elections. You know, the balance of power will probably change a bit. Some parties will increase their seats, some will reduce, some big leaders will lose elections. Some forces which have been marginalized after 2006, some of the right-wing forces, the Hindu right-wing, for example, they are reported to be increasing their strength. So you will see some changes, but yes, the top political leadership will probably remain the same. Does this mean, I don't think we should be really cynical, because there has, as I said right at the beginning, a lot has been achieved as well. You know, 4 years ago, there were 2 armies in this country, and the peace process succeeded. A section of the Maoist combatants were integrated, and it was because these leaders managed to strike a deal. How many revolutionary forces have you seen which have given up their coercive apparatus? I feel that, you know, despite there being the same leaders, there has also been a lot of agreement on constitution making. There were areas of contention, the form of government, the nature of federalism, but there was a lot of work that the committees in the CA had done, and all parties have agreed that they will own up that work. So we are not starting from ground zero here, right? We've done, the Nepal has come a long way, and I think that this leadership, despite its failings, despite the frustrations that one feels, the depression that one has to often undergo because of the failings of these leaders, they have also achieved a lot. And that there has never been a point, even during the conflict and during the peace process, where the Nepali leaders have stopped talking to each other, as bitter as they may be about each other. So the culture of dialogue, the fact that a lot has been achieved, and the fact that they know this is they know their political survival is at stake. Look, if this CA fails, the centrist forces, the center-left forces, and those who were responsible for bringing in this transition, their survival is at stake. The extreme left, led by the CPNM faction, which is boycotting the polls, and the extreme right, particularly the former king and his supporters, all of them are waiting to pounce because they want this framework to fail. So for their own political survival, I think the political leaders will be more responsible, and I'm cautiously optimistic about a new constitution.
That's pretty clear from our guess that Nepal has been in a political deadlock for years. In 2008, it became a republic after King Gyanendra, whose dynasty dates back to 1768, lost popular support. As part of a peace deal, the Maoist leader, known as Prashant Jha, formed a coalition government but resigned just a year later. The government has since changed 5 times, while a special assembly has struggled to reach a consensus on both the structure of the republic and the constitution. Elections have been delayed numerous times as a result. But after years of deadlock and despite pre-poll violence, elections are expected to go ahead. Ameet, effectively, we're looking at two issues here: drawing up a new constitution and putting a proper political system in place. Is federalism still all the rage?
I think a lot of that depends upon the composition of the next Constituent Assembly. There are new political forces on the ballot. I'm saying new because the right-wing political forces, which were insignificant in the last Constituent Assembly, are likely to make huge gains, and that will make a lot of difference in the power balance of the new Constituent Assembly. That will decide what kind of federalism we are looking at, what kind of federalism we will possibly come out with. I don't see federalism itself will lead to any kind of disintegration that some people fear. Federalism will be good for this country and essential for a diverse country and society that we are.
But they
because
said this
many people are looking for
jumping in, a strong electoral surge for the right wing, the pro-Hindu former royalist party. What do you think is going on there? I mean, are we likely to see the monarchy back?
No, there is no chance of monarchy coming back. And yes, there is likely to be a huge surge for the right-wing Hindu party. But even then, I think the mainstream parties, the parties who were the part of the second popular movement in 2006, will still garner two-thirds majority. And if they come to an agreement, they can write a constitution and consolidate secularism, consolidate federalism, consolidate the republic that we have today. So I'm not fearing, and I don't see any chance of monarchy coming back.
Michael, how weakened do you think the state has been by international actors, and I'm referring to India and China here in particular?
That's quite a sensitive question. I mean, particularly, I think the role of India, which one hopes and assumes is hoping for a clear outcome and a moving forward of the constitutional process here. Nepal has become excessively dependent upon external forces in all kinds of different ways over the last, well, not just the last 5-10 years, but over a much longer term, in terms of devising its own policies on developments and so on and so forth. So I think those of us who are friends of Nepal, would like to see Nepal chart its own course, its own future, with friendly support from neighbours and advisors from further afield, but with a clearer idea of its own trajectory and its own identity.
Very diplomatic response, I must say, with all sensitivities aside. Prashant, how is India viewing this? Because China is certainly getting more involved in Nepal.
India has been an integral part of Nepali domestic politics ever since 1951. All major political movements, processes of government formation, Delhi and different constituencies in Delhi have had a role. Now, because in 2005-06, the peace process was in a way facilitated by India, India's role has been pretty influential in the past 6-7 years. India was very keen that this election happens, and earlier this year, when this experiment with the Chief Justice-led government happened, we know that India played a big role in supporting this Chief Justice-led government, even though there was criticism that it violated the fundamental democratic principle of separation of powers, and their logic was that we need to do this because this is the only way to get to elections. So in a way, India feels vindicated that the interim arrangement that it has supported has got the country to the elections, and it wants, from what I gather from people in Delhi, India would like to see the process preserved. So these elections will lead to that. Now, different constituencies in Delhi have different political preferences about electoral outcomes, but I think overall India will respect the outcome that the Nepali people provide in the elections.
I mean, how important...
And will work with the government that is elected.
Okay. I mean, how important are these elections to those Nepalese working outside of your country, the millions of them all around the world, many of them being exploited because the economic situation is so bad in Nepal?
I think it is hugely, extremely important. We have been a country, in a way, in transition for now almost 20 years. I'm saying 20 years because when we had reinstated multi-party democracy in 1990, 4 years after that, Maoists went to the way Maoists started armed insurgency, and since then this country has remained in a kind of transition that has crippled development activities, that has shattered our economy, and that is one reason why so many millions of Nepalese are out of country doing menial job and without dignity. And for them, they are definitely looking back to their country for stability and more prosperous Nepal.
I mean, it must be
means a lot for
devastating,
them.
mustn't it? I mean, I was reading that, Kathmandu gets about 2 hours of water every couple of days. There are dramatic fuel shortages, and those who are working away, I mean, there's something like 2 dead bodies shipped back a day. It must be devastating.
It is. For the people who are, for many migrant workers from abroad, they look at the country and they feel devastated, as we Nepalis back in Kathmandu feel the same way, because as you rightly said, we receive dead bodies almost every day, and that creates a lot of frustration even back home.
Michael, were you surprised with Prashant Jha and those working alongside him at how little development there was underneath him? I mean, when he came to power, he promised a new Switzerland. What went wrong?
Well, I think too much of the political energy has been devoted to the internal power struggles internal to the political community and internal to Kathmandu, and so many of the country's other very pressing problems have been left to one side through this very long process of negotiation, conflict, power struggle over the shape of the state, the shape of the nation that is going to come out of this whole process, which is so very, very protracted. And perhaps, I mean, some analysts say that the only way the Nepali economy has managed to remain kind of in some senses intact nationally has been through the remittances that have come particularly from the Gulf states, where large numbers of Nepali labourers are working. I mean, controversially, as you know from recent media coverage, in very, very difficult conditions. But obviously, this is not an economy that is sustainable long term. If it has to depend on very large numbers of its citizens actually exiting the country to send money back from elsewhere, it's very vulnerable to political changes and economic changes outside the region, and it cannot continue like this ad infinitum.
I mean, I should imagine that truth and reconciliation process also needs to get underway, doesn't it? I mean, we still don't know. It's not any clearer who's been responsible for all those atrocities committed during the civil war.
I mean, this is a major concern in Nepal, is the culture and environment of impunity that has been allowed to develop over recent years, with the families of the disappeared, for instance, still awaiting processes that will make clear what has happened to their loved ones during the conflict, quite a few years ago now. Promises have been made and not even half fulfilled or addressed, and one hopes that all of these things will begin to come true, to come clear, if and when the institutions are established that can enable them to happen.
I mean, as a Nepalese, what is your wish? What is the best scenario for you?
I hope we can write the constitution very quickly as the leaders are promising, because many top leaders of the major political parties have promised that they will try to write the constitution in next 6 months and put behind this transition. And I want to see the development works back. I want to see more jobs created. I want to see a peaceful Nepal where people can feel that they can live with peace and dignity.
Well, I certainly hope you get what you want. Ameet Dhakal, with those final words. Also talking to us throughout the show, Prashant Jha and Michael Hutt. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. And of course, thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want, of course, you can send us your feedback. Just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Jane Dutton, and the rest of the team, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.